Like, okay, we're live. So we have about a third of the group that have already joined, so we'll get started. Welcome to everybody to this month's installment of, I think it's E-commerce Agency Insights is the title for this webinar series. So once a month we pick a topic and then do a webinar on that specific topic. And this month we've got Tiara. Looking at the group of agencies that are already signed in, I feel like most of the people in the group already know who you are. So they either saw you recently at the Agency Summit in Austin, or they know you from our agency community. And we're going to pick, well, I'm not going to do anything on this call apart from do emails, probably catch up on all my emails. This will be all over to Tiara. So I'll let you introduce yourself and get started.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining, or if you're watching this later, welcome. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Today I'll be talking about agency operations. Shocking. There's a lot of different areas that I'll cover, but going to, make sure you walk away from this call understanding what an agency should focus on at its core when it comes to operations. And if you already are focused on some of these areas, hopefully you find some ways to improve or to dive deeper or just to think differently, right? So a little bit about myself. My name is Tiara Tragas, and I work with agencies. I help them with their people, processes, technologies, and their finances. My degrees are in accounting and hospitality management. I've worked in and alongside e-commerce agencies for the past 7, going on 8 years, all different size agencies and all different services. I held various roles there. Started with, an office manager role, then moved into an accounting manager role. I grew my first agency. We grew from 50 to 300 people during COVID. During that time, we needed a lot more visibility into cash flow and having strong financial, processes as we grew during that time. Worked under a CPA, learned all the ins and outs, and was always noticing that maybe we're paying someone full time, but they're not working full time hours. And you deliver this information to the delivery team, but nothing would ever happen, right? Month over month, you'd see that same situation happen. And so this really propelled me to move and create a role in operations where I could go and ask that person, hey, what other skills do you have, right? What have you been wanting to learn? Is there courses that we could provide for you? Or remove that person from the team if we truly didn't have work for them. And so really making sure that we were tapping into our people to be as efficient as possible, giving them the tools and optimizing our internal systems so that we can work effectively as possible, connecting departments together. Where the ball gets dropped a lot is from sales to delivery or delivery back to sales. And so I have a passion for all those little areas. And then really, once you can kind of streamline your operations, you can tell the whole story behind your P&L, and what happened in the month is because of what happened with your team and your clients. So that's kind of where my worlds collide. The agencies that I work with, I either provide fractional CFO or COO services, or just some sort of, coaching and providing them processes and tools. The agencies that I work with specialize in design and development, Shopify, non-Shopify platforms, email, paid, staff augmentation. And I also do trainings and coaching sessions with tech partners and tech platforms. So the more that they know about how an agency runs, the more successful and supportive they can be for you guys. So I think, for me, it's just really important for me that the work that I'm doing makes a difference. We're not saving lives or babies by any means, but if I can help a company build a strong internal core and allow them to be able to grow and scale and help people grow and scale both professionally and personally, that makes me feel good. So anyways, the goal of today, as I mentioned, I'll be covering all of these topics. This deck I kind of built from my hands-on experience working with my agencies, specifically for e-commerce agencies, that is my niche. So we're going to cover what makes a scalable agency foundation, and what you can implement right away, right? And you've all heard this phrase of like, we need to make sure that the house is strong, and has a strong foundation before we start building on it. And that's what I think operations is all about. So going right into that, what the F does operations mean? It kind of means like everything but nothing at the same time. There's someone, Kevin, in our community who refers to it as like the glue holding everything together. And that has really stuck with me. Operations, it touches everything. It is a very messy glue, right? It bleeds out everywhere. It's like the silent backbone of any company, not just an agency, but of any company that operates. And quite frankly, if there's, any CEOs on the call, usually the CEOs feel personally attacked when I'm doing these sessions, but it's all the shit that you guys hate doing, right? But it's absolutely necessary. Like someone has to do it. So when done right, it creates clarity, it removes bottlenecks, and it keeps the engine running smoothly. When left ignored, which happens a lot, scaling becomes really difficult. Silos exist everywhere. Each department runs as its own separate company. They don't know each other very well. Profitability is really unpredictable, right? And you see when I come into agencies that have run for a long time, there's a lot of kind of undoing of bad habits, right, that we have to do in order to remove all those bottlenecks and silos, in order to get the teams to get along, to run efficiently, and to run as one company, which they're the merchants and your guys' customers, they notice that, right? Even if the communication is very different from the salesperson to delivery to the person who's reaching out to follow up about an invoice. So that's a little bit about what operations is, right? It kind of supports all those different departments. Early on in an agency, it's usually one person, wearing multiple hats, and you can grow to, a very, big size, even 70 people with just one person in operations. If it's finance, also you need, probably a second pair of hands there to assist with that. And I really like to say, like, it's not just another overhead cost. It's really about being strategic and thoughtful in your business. So when we think about operations, the most important area, or the first area that you should be focused on, is your utilization. Utilization is, I like to think of it, it's the pulse of your agency. I think without it, forecasting and profitability are simply guesswork. I think that you must have a system for tracking, reporting on, and measuring utilization of your service team. That's like the first team that you should be focused on, right? The team that I think you can get away with no resource planning, like maybe up to around like 7 or 8 team members, as long as you're tracking workload on specific tasks, right? What are task estimates and actuals? But you don't want to wait too long to implement utilization tracking. I think sometimes, companies will come to me, they're like, oh yeah, we only have a handful of people, we don't need to track this, right? And I'm like, well, you have a lean team. And oftentimes with lean teams, they have less resources to go around, right? Like that for, right, against their planned work and for clients and internal work as it relates to their capacity in order for them to be effective, right? You have less team members to go around to share. And even when you do, you want to be able to understand, when do we need to hire? If we need to hire, is the team being effective? Like, it can't just be a guessing game. And a lot of agencies kind of start out with, maybe they were a freelancer and now they're trying to manage people. Managing people from the HR perspective is a lot. It's hard in itself. So having like clear, measurable data where it's not a guessing game if people are busy or not, is really important to, for any size agency. So diving into utilization, you hear a lot of times, I'm sure you see on LinkedIn, people talk about utilization or even finances, and they make up, in any conversation in our industry, right? People are making up acronyms left and right. You'll never hear me make up a new acronym or a new formula. I don't want to overcomplicate things. I like to keep it as simple as possible, right? So these are the two most important metrics to learn. Overall utilization, which simply means of a person's available time, how much did we use that time, right? How much of it was planned? For how much of it was spent working, and that can be spent on both client efforts and internal efforts, which are both billable and non-billable things. Billable utilization, which is arguably the most important, right? It's critical for our department heads to be able to manage this, and it's simply stating that of a person's time that they worked, how much of it was spent on billable efforts, right? And we should be setting, targets for each role on our service or delivery team and be able to track that month over month to see, if they're hitting those billable targets and overall targets as well. I don't have on here non-billable utilization. It is quite simply the inverse of the billable. I also don't like to set targets for a non-billable utilization. It's more of like how much would we allow as a maximum kind of thing. And it's different for all roles, right? Obviously, someone in a leadership role may have more non-billable time there. But either way, I see a lot where some agencies, if they are tracking utilization, it's so heavily focused on billable. And we're not looking at like, okay, if a technical lead is constantly being pulled into sales, are we planning sales time for him or her every week? If not, we should be, right? Because that work is just as important as our client billable work. Well, depending who you ask in the agency. But even if we don't think it's as important, it's going to happen week over week. They're going to be pulled in to sales calls or helping scope things, right? So why wouldn't we plan for that time? All right, so some targets here. If you are have different tabs open, this would be a good time to come over to this tab and take a screenshot. People are always asking me like, what are good targets that we should be aiming for? It really, my answer is always, it starts out with that it varies by agency. Starting with like the overall utilization, this one varies by agency and how we think about a person's capacity as it relates to full time. That's where overall utilization matters most. I have, a lot of agencies have some roles, or maybe they are fully contractor model based. So for that, if we have contractor positions, the overall utilization is always 100%, meaning the hours that they worked equal the hours that they were available, right? They're always going to be at 100%. So where we're really focused on analyzing our overall utilization is when it comes down to our full-time team members, right? If they're full-time, we expect them to log 40 hours. We expect them to work 35 hours, depending on what's the culture of your agency, right? But remote work life, a lot of full-time team members, they need an hour break. They're going to be switching over the laundry, whether we permit them the time for that or not. They're going to take their dog out. They're going to eat lunch. So let's plan for that time. If you have robots on your team, then yeah, I have some roles where we have like email marketing technicians, and they're all, Romanian robots pretty much. And we want their overall utilization set to 100%. Cool. Okay. Well, it can vary even not just by agency, but it can vary by role, right? So I think as well as, it's more common in US based agencies or for agencies that are just implementing this, and they may have inflated time logs to start. Maybe they have inaccurate time tracking data, or they have time logging compliance issues, or maybe they have more full-time people. I would say to strive for an 80% overall utilization. This also, allows time for holidays, breaks, time off, sick days, things like that. Now, billable utilization, I think it's the biggest one to set a metric, a target for, and have your team manage. Having a pulse on where billable utilization is at, it helps us to know what work we can take on from the sales pipeline. It helps us to know when we could take on that work. It helps us to know or if we need to hire, right? And if we do need to hire, when would we need to hire, right? If these roles came in on X date, then we would need to bring someone on, by the week of, let's say, June 1st. So that means that we need to talk to the recruiting department and start interviewing now, right? Because a good hire takes time. I would say that, and with this, it helps us predict our profitability, right? Because not only if we have financial targets set up, and if you're a great agency with operations and finances, you are adding in your pipeline deals to understand your projected gross profit, let's say, or profitability, or you're tracking your sales KPIs, but are you tracking net profitability targets? And you could look at if all those potential deals came in, but are you also looking at that if you needed to hire someone? Because if you did, that would bring your gross profit down potentially, right? Or with those new projects in parallel, right? So you want to make sure that you have a way that you can kind of track this, and you can kind of track your profitability by understanding when you need to hire people. For the billable targets, they really do vary by role and by agency again. But I would say for any role in the service department, do not go any lower than 55%. 55% should really be only for like strategists or project managers. They need more time to context switch, to be doing maybe non-billable tasks, or maybe they're meeting with team members and they're talking about multiple clients on a call, and it's hard to kind of pinpoint that time back to a certain client, right? Everyone else should have at least 62.5 billable percentage or up. And if we do, let's say, just doing some math here, if someone logged 26 hours of billable time out of 40 or 35, that's 65% of billable time. So, and that 26 hours, divided by like a 5-day work week, that's about a little over 5 hours a day of their time would be billable, right? So really, if you have developers, it's probably higher than that. It's probably about 75%. If you have QA, their time is probably really high as well. And then non-billable, talked about this a little bit on the last slide, but non-billable, I wouldn't really set a target for this. I mean, you do want to track it, but I hate to say it's like, yeah, we reached our non-billable target. Well, that doesn't sound nice. It's more of a non-billable allowance for the team, right? So it should be no greater than maybe 25%. Or if someone is new and you're setting utilization targets by person for some reason, usually by role is better. And you're taking the average of all those team members. So if someone is new, they may have lower billable time at first, maybe like the first 3 months. So, if you're counting them as a part of a role, if you have a small agency, the weight of that is going to be quite, greater. But that's okay. That's why it's a target, right? And over time, they will reach that. So another good screenshot here, people will ask me a lot, like, I run a design and dev agency. Here are the different roles. This is a good kind of starting out point, or if you already are tracking utilization for your company, then, maybe look at the targets you have compared to these. This is the average that I set for a lot of my design and development agencies. These are all the billable percentages or targets that we try to hit per month and that we track to. And this is what it converts to in terms of the billable hours and non-billable hours per week. And, you may use for technical lead, this could be engineering manager, solutions architect, technical architect, senior engineer. I mean, there's so many different ways. You can also call this role diva, because I think technical leads are divas, and they know it. But yeah, so this, you can interchange out these roles for your agency, but these are some targets that you could be tracking to. And for an email marketing agency or a paid strategy agency, same kind of roles, maybe marketing manager swapped out for project manager, maybe your account manager and marketing manager are the same person. I don't know. But here are some different examples for some of my agencies that we try to strive to. And you can see here that, these roles, technician, copywriter, designer, they don't need as much time to kind of prep, if they even need this 1 hour a day or 5 hours a week, but it is nice that if they are included in company calls, all hands meetings, if we're doing any like happy hours that we want the team to log time for, like whatever kind of culture events as well for the agency, we want to not penalize them, if they log that non-billable time. We just want to kind of, maybe you need to go back and see like how much internal time or calls do we expect from them per month, and kind of set your targets backwards based on that. Okay, so when it comes time to like actually analyze our utilization and manage it, right? We have all this data, we have this time tracking data, we export it, we import it into a spreadsheet, or we have, our tool do that utilization analysis for us. We should also be able to audit and track and measure opportunity costs, as I like to call them, which this is the cost of the time that was unutilized. So if your team, let's say a certain role or the agency, had a cumulative 60 hours that were available, that were unworked, so it was time unutilized, right? So they were available for 60 hours across all the team members, and we just didn't have work planned for them, right? AKA they were on the bench, right, for that time. If we multiply those hours, 60, let's say the average billable rate for the agency, the ABR is 175, then we left let's say 10K on the table theoretically. Now of course, let's say 60 times 175, we left about $10,500 on the table. Now of course, if we're billing for retainers or flat fee projects, then really this is just a theory. And I wouldn't say go to your team members and tell them like, hey guys, our team's opportunity cost was 10K. But I think as a leadership team, it's a good way to measure how much more in revenue our current team could take on as a snapshot, whether this is billable client work, or if we know of upcoming bench time, because we're tracking, honestly, we should be tracking utilization through the end of the year. At this point, between their internal time and client time billed, if we see that certain team members or roles have upcoming downtime within the next 3 months, right? And we don't think any new projects will come in, we can take advantage of that ahead of time, and we can avoid this sunken opportunity cost by having those team members maybe work on internal efforts or OKRs or the CEO's pet projects that he's been dying to work on. We should be setting OKRs that's later on in the quarter, but that time, it's a great way to say, hey, designer, we have some upcoming downtime for you. We'd love for you to work on our new homepage, right, for our agency's website, right, or all those things that we can never get to. So opportunity cost doesn't literally mean, this is how many dollars we missed out on with client work. It could also mean it's just that this is how much time we could have used on our, redesign of our agency website that's forever ongoing and unmeasured and unforecasted for, oftentimes at least. So yeah, kind of the second part of utilization planning, right? We just talked a lot about like targets to set, and the way that it's managed is by, again, exporting those time logs and putting them in some sort of spreadsheet. I have one that I will link coming up here shortly, where you can see how the team did for a past period in time. But we also should be doing resource planning to predict and understand what is the team's capacity proactively from now till the rest of the year, and really focus on the next 3 months or the next month or weeks at a time, right? So this means planning and allocating everyone's time per person, per project, and per week to balance their client and internal efforts. We should be planning out as far as advance as we know, through the end of the year, ideally, I like to say. When you set this up, it should be updated regularly. I think that someone in operations should truly be owning resource planning, but it really is, I love to see when it's a group effort, when you have team leads or even project managers are the ones that are updating their project budgets, and those project budgets feed into the resource planning tool or spreadsheet that you have. And so as they're updating their individual projects, we can kind of see at a holistic company view, right, in the operation, see, okay, if that person updates their project budget, is that person that's spread across 5 different projects, are they okay? Is their capacity work for them? And then if not, working with those project managers or account managers strategically to make sure that everyone is, being properly utilized against their targets and not working like overtime or anything like that. So I think as well, someone from operations should be, I do this weekly with my agencies where we're adding in pipeline deals. So we are converting those deals into estimate by week by role, and we're plugging those into our master allocations within the next 3 months. And we start to pre-plan even before a contract has been sent. So maybe it's pipeline deals that are 50% and above of success rate that are going to close. And we start to potentially look at who could work on those deals and when could we potentially start. I think that having a view that shows, hey, if all of these deals closed on top of all of our actual existing projects, right? Can we handle all of this or do we need to hire, right? It also can help be great sales levers for sales teams where we can go to a prospect and say, hey, prospect, we have room to kick off one project the week of May 1st. Or if you can't sign by then it's going to be a standard 2 weeks from signature to start. Internally, we can try to plan and see if we see that capacity is looking full. If all those deals were to sign, we can start interviewing and get some great people lined up versus waiting for a deal to close to then open up a job description, then get it posted on the site, because we all know what happens there. We cannot find a good enough person to hire in time after that deal already signs. So we end up overworking our existing team, or we find someone really incredibly, or we get catfished, or they're incredibly unreliable from like Fiverr, Upwork, and that's never a good time for anyone. So, I always recommend as well, if you don't already do this, take your most common roles that you hire for, whether this is developer at like a mid-level, project manager, account manager, marketing manager, update your job descriptions for those and get them posted on your agency's website and just keep them up there at all times and have a flow of applicants running through your system at all times. That way, when you do go need to hire, you kind of have your own pool of applicants and you don't immediately have to reach out to recruiters there. Okay, so I think, a lot of agencies will use when I start working with them, they've only been doing resource planning and utilization reporting in their current project management tool. The issue that I see with that is that as we're planning for pipeline deals, let's say we randomly assign, I don't know, someone named Miranda as the project manager, just because we want to see what it does to her capacity, right? Well, if we do that in the project management tool, Miranda's going to get a notification. She's going to start slacking you. She's going to freak out and say she's going on vacation that week, that kicks off, blah, 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 blah. It starts a whole big commotion for no reason because the deal didn't even close yet. We just want to play around with this. So I really like having a safe place where I can kind of plan for things that maybe haven't happened yet, maybe never will happen, right? I think regardless, though, of where you do this, whether it's in a spreadsheet or a fancy tool, it has to serve people and processes, not the other way around. You need to make sure that you keep it simple, and you really need to make sure that your team understands it. You need to build KPIs around it for your team to be accountable. And if you dare, I have built a entry-level spreadsheet that you can try out to kind of build this on your own. It's linked here and it goes through. I have directions on here as well, but the ultimate result is you should end up with like a utilization dashboard. You should be able to report all the way through end of year, utilization by role, by person, the plan versus actual. Once you plug in your data, you'll be able to see things. Anyways, so going back to our deck here. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about, the P&L side of things. It's really important that your sales team, who usually aren't numbers people, no offense sales team, but they need an easy way to make sure that the projects and the prices that they're selling, these scopes of work, that they are profitable, right? There's nothing worse than project comes in and the sales team is all excited. And the service team is like, well, we're never going to be able to meet this scope and timeline. and sales team is like, okay, cool, we don't have wiggle room in their budget and we can't do any change orders. So then what? The project manager is just set up for failure from the start, right? So I always recommend to, even if we're selling a retainer and we're not selling hours-based services, which is, very important, we need to make sure internally that we break down all of our scopes into hours and by role. And we need to sum all those hours by role for the project or the retainer. And we need to multiply those hours times the average cost per hour, right? So if we have a list of designers, we need to look at all of their hourly rates and come up with the average for that and multiply the amount of hours for design that we think will happen for this project or that we estimated for, and multiply that by the rate to understand the cost of that role for that project. Then what we'll do is we'll sum up to get our total estimated project cost, whether that's for the whole flat fee project, the retainer month, if they're bronze, silver, gold, whatever the service is. And then we can work backwards to say, okay, well, if this is the client's budget, this is their, or this is the low end price that we can charge, this is the high end. Let's understand what is our projected profit margin, so that we can, kind of guarantee a profitability there, depending on, the scope of work and the price that's being sold. So we kind of need an easy calculator for the sales team to be able to follow. I do have one linked here for you guys. You can see here that we have here's an estimate, this is for a design and development project. You can fill this in as well. So if you're doing premium theme implementations all the time, you could kind of fill this out. That way your team always has a starting point. They don't have to always come up with an estimate from scratch each time. And as they add in hours per role, there's a profit calculator here where the agency has to come up with what is their average cost per hour for all their different roles, plug in the roles as it relates to their agency. Then they can understand what are our projected costs for this project, what's the price we're planning to charge, and are we hitting our estimated profit margin. Now, a good profit margin for an agency for every project should be at least 70 to 75%. And the sales team should know that target as well, right? We should do everything in our power to keep it there. So let's talk a little bit about gross profit, right? Gross profit is a key financial metric that tells us how much money our agency actually keeps after covering the cost of delivering said work, right? And, quite simply, it's calculated as our revenue less those costs of goods sold, which gives us a clearer picture of how efficiently we're able to run our projects. We should be able to calculate our gross profit per project. Of course, for your agency, you're doing this month over month. Again, aiming for the 70% gross profit is ideal, but this really varies depending on project complexity, agency size, service model, and where are our team members located and what are their salaries, right? A higher gross profit means that we have more room to reinvest into the business. We have more room for hiring and increasing salaries or bonuses if we need to do that. If our gross profit is too low, it signals that either our pricing needs an adjustment or our costs need to be optimized. There's only a few ways, guys, spoiler alert, that we can improve our gross profit. And yeah, it's something really important. We should be tracking project by project because we should track it while projects are running versus just at the end saying, oh, shoot, we didn't make as much money as we thought on that, right? We should charge higher next time. Because from the time that the project started until, the end, 5 more of those have been sold by the sales team. So we need to be acting quick on this data that we have from our time logs, right? And understanding our costs on the projects month over month. We should be reporting on this. Another area, kind of jumping into finances here, is understanding our operating expenses, aka our OPEX. I like to talk about this because oftentimes people don't. I really like to consider the OPEX for an agency. It's usually the Wild West. OPEX expenses are all the costs that are needed to keep a business running, but they're not directly tied to specific projects, right? I think it's important to control our OPEX, especially as an agency grows, because I've seen it before, and I know Rachel has too, excessive spending can really eat into profitability, even if the revenue is high, right? And so I've seen also that agencies that successfully optimize their OpEx, and it's easier to do that when they're smaller. They're more easily able to print money. They have less overhead there. But by cutting unnecessary expenses and investing in efficient tools, it really helps improve margins and long-term scalability. I think I don't like to say cutting costs. It's all about optimizing our costs, right? There's a way to cut waste without sacrificing areas that can really be like growth investments. I get asked this a lot. I know Rachel does as well. Like, what should I be spending on those under the line kind of categories, right? And so this is another good screenshot to take. I would say no more than 30% of your income. So these different ranges here will kind of add up to that 30% on the high end there for your payroll, for overhead, marketing, rent, professional services, office supplies, kind of company-wide software, things like that. So at the end of the day, when it comes to our net profit, I'm giving you guys like a crash course in agency financials, but for a healthy agency, net income should be around 20 to 25% of total revenue. If net income is too low, your cost of goods sold are probably a little bit too high. You have a bloated OpEx or you have inefficient pricing, right? And it's time for an update. A strong net income means your agency is probably small because it's easier to hit those numbers when your agency is small. Or, if you're a big agency and you're able to hit this number, then you guys are doing great. You have ability to reinvest into growth, reward employees, and remain financially stable if you're looking for an M&A or something like this, right? I think making sure at the end of the day, no matter what, that you're tracking and optimizing your net income, this will in turn ensure long-term sustainability and profitability, of course. So when it comes to tracking profitability, this can't just be in your QuickBooks tool or any, accounting software that you have, because those accounting softwares, which I use and love religiously, they don't give you the percentages, right? They don't tell you KPIs. They don't let you set OKRs and all that kind of fun stuff. And also, your leadership team probably doesn't have access to that, and there's probably some sensitive information there. So you need a way to track project profitability and tracking financial KPIs so that you can promote visibility amongst team members and empower them by implementing profit margin trackers, utilization dashboards, so that they can stay informed and kind of know what you're talking about, right? There's no use in just the CEO and CFO knowing where we're at, because it's really the leadership team, right, and the service team members that are the ones that can make a difference and help us meet those goals that we've set. Okay, and I have a link here. Lots of templates here, but this is kind of a P&L forecast. You can use it to kind of mirror your P&L and the different kind of chart of accounts that you would have. You can see here, you can kind of use it as a forecasting tool. You can add in pipeline deals. You can see where you're at in terms of actual revenue all the way through the end of the year versus your targeted revenue, and how close or far you are away from those things, as well as different percentages like cost of goods sold to income, your target gross profit margin, and your net profit margin percentage that, again, your QuickBooks tool or accounting tool can't give you. And having this revenue forecast is a great way to kind of break down all those different service lines that your agency has or per department, and kind of add in projected deals and actual deals that you have, and kind of let your sales team manage this on their own and be empowered and be in control and understand where are we at in terms of our KPIs per service line, per month, and per quarter roll-ups. Okay, moving out of finances. I know you're so happy. You wish we could have stayed there forever, but want to hit on our processes a little bit. So, when it comes to processes, anything that we do more than once, we should have a process for in our personal lives and professionally, right? By building SOPs or sequence of procedures, right? This makes our agency more valuable to clients, to team members, to future acquirers. It also just helps us to know, what the fuck we need to be doing at all times, right? Not every time we sign a project does it need to feel like it's the first time we've ever signed a deal, or every time we bring on a new team member or a new client. It just doesn't need to feel like it's the first time we've ever done something, right? We should be able to set up processes on the way things should be run, not the way things are being run today, and clearly outline who does what and when and how and why. They're very therapeutic. I work with a lot of agencies where we, go in, I ask team members, how's it going? What do you like? What do you not like? Usually sales hates delivery, delivery hates sales. Okay, got it. Every agency thinks that their way of running something is totally unique, and it never is. But standardizing these things from all the project phases, the handoffs, the reports that we track internally or client facing, they don't just fix client delivery, they fix how we operate as a business. We have processes, I have processes set up for finances, onboarding, offboarding, recruiting, HR, general operations, as well as sales and delivery, right? Always we start with delivery, then we go to sales, then we go to all the operation stuff. But it is really what changes an agency from being like good to great, and your clients will notice it, right? It sometimes could even win you the deal from another agency. And then it comes down to our systems. So once we have our processes defined, unless they're integrated into the tools that we use every day, they mean nothing, right? So we need to convert all of those SOPs into tool templates. We need to put them into our project management tools. We need to create a template for recruiting, for month-end close, for a retainer starting, for one-time build starting, and have subtasks that are predefined. And we need to have all those standards that we've written down or links copy and pasted into those task templates. That way we are constantly reminding the team members and showing them, right, these are the processes that should be followed. I always recommend for systems optimization, this doesn't just mean that, we move all our documentation into our tools. All the time we get emails about, hey, ClickUp is rolling out new features. There's a free webinar, or Slack is rolling out new things. Does anyone ever go to those? No, but we pay so much money for these tools. So why wouldn't we empower people on our teams to become power users, right, of these tools? We should have our office manager. We should have our executive assistant join those webinars and really, start to understand, hey, what are the new features that we could be taking advantage of for our agencies, right? And how do we make the tools work for us versus vice versa? So I really recommend, empowering your team members, someone on the team to go to those kind of free webinars. Also to run a tool audit. Your office manager can run this to kind of understand who's charging what, when, where, and how. Everything's on the CEO's card. Then you ask the CEO and they have no earthly idea what those tools are or who bought them, right? And this could be helping you. If you're not doing this, you could be at risk for security purposes. You could have people that have access to tools that don't need to. And you could be saving money and helping your bottom line out, right? It's a very low-hanging fruit to do. You also should have a way or a process for standardizing access, naming to things, and permissions. That way everything is kind of easy to scale. Okay, and talking about goals, right? So how do we actually implement this or any of this or all of this, right? I love to roll out with my agencies both objectives and key results, or OKRs, and key performance indicators, or KPIs. My KPIs, those are going to be performance tracking. It's nothing outside of the person or the team's day-to-day role, right? It's just measuring numerically, did they hit their goal, right? Did we retain clients at the percentage that we want to over the quarter? Did we hit our sales goal for retainers, one-time builds, and overall revenue for the company? Did we hit our gross profit or net profit percentages? Did we hit our utilization targets, right? For billable and overall. For our OKRs, these are structured goals. They're owned by departments. And the objective is, I would say to always, talk to your CEO. They have a company vision, right? Their North Star that they ramble about every time you get on the call with them. Cool, we'll turn that into actual chewable action items that the team can deliver on so that his or her dream actually becomes tangible things that we can do to get it done, right? Those should be the objectives and key results should be things that are outside of our day-to-day that we need to do and want to do to get to those companies' goals, whether they are the numerical goals or, we want to be the leading service or we want to have a people first agency, whatever the goal may be, right? So that could be redoing our website. That could be creating reusable components, a component library in Figma, all those kinds of things that the team wishes they had time to do. You can set OKRs around them and be really realistic. Don't set too many for the service team who isn't going to have the time realistically to do that, right? And set them in a way that makes sense per quarter. I would say a great time to implement OKRs is during or after an annual planning session. And it's a great framework to kind of take the goals or the things that you guys want to do for next year and turn them into, quarterly action items that you can do. I have some templates as well on both OKRs and KPIs. I don't have them linked here, but you could always, message me and I can help you out with those. All right, and I'm going to get to a question here that I see in the chat, but here's a QR code of mine so that we can get in touch. And someone asked me, am I factoring non-billable time into OpEx as indirect labor? If the person is, good question, if the person is majority a billable resource, no, their non-billable time goes above the line in cost of goods sold. Now, a lot of times, and it's becoming a lot more common, that agencies, we have, team leads that truly do split their time between non-billable strategic company efforts and billable cost of goods sold efforts, whether they're running, teams on the billable side or they are running projects themselves. And so in that case, we'll say, okay, what is the average percentage, right, of that person's salary or cost that is above the line in cost of goods sold and below the line? And let's say it's 60%, 40%. We will do a journal entry in the accounting software and we will do the math in our forecasting tool to split that person's salary between cost of goods sold and overhead all the way through the end of the year. I won't go month to month and change it based on how much time was spent. That is a little bit incremental and more work than, the squeeze is worth. But if you truly do have team members that are split between both, you can, go ahead and actually split their salaries there or their, contractor expenses. Good question there. So yeah, that's how you can get in contact with me. And we'd love to have you join the community. Rachel's created this very unique and very fulfilling and fun community for agencies to come together, be vulnerable, big and small, ask questions, learn from each other's mistakes, and get to hear from me and my friends and talk about all ways that we love to help agencies and how we can help you guys. So if you want to sign up, please reach out to Rachel and I, and we can give you more information. I have one other question here. What are some of our favorite tools in the ops space for areas like utilization or resource planning? Great question. Google Sheets. Google Sheets is my best friend for this because I can be as flexible as I'd like and don't have to pay for it as long as you're paying for Google Workspace, which most of us are. Any other questions? Okay.
For anybody asking, that photo is not Photoshop. That's a real photo.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, it does feel like it's bring your daughter to work day. That's what the photo looks like.
I love it. That'll be us in less than a month from now in Valencia at our next summit.
Yeah, we've got the EU Agency Summit coming up in Valencia in just under 4 weeks now. 4 weeks this week, I think. And then we've got the UK Agency Summit happening in July, which is exciting. So I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully we'll get an updated photo here that it just takes us from the waist up.
Yeah, I'll have to bring larger heels.
Yeah, and I'll sit down. Awesome. Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions, have we answered all the questions that were in the chat?
Yes.
Does anybody else have another question that they want to add? We can run another 10 minutes for anybody who's got specific questions. If somebody wants to come and join live and ask some questions, then happy to do that.
Harpy said, great webinar. Will there be a recording sent later? I missed the first 15 minutes.
Yes, this is recorded, and then an email will go out. An email automatically goes out from the system anyway for everybody who's signed up.
Oh, great. Cool.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think we're done. And then I'll take the slides and do a follow-up email. So let's see, I just had two more. Okay, two more questions. One from Caitlin and one from Maya. So Caitlin said, do you consider internal projects billable if they have an ROI against them?
It's a good question. It really depends, but you can, yes. And I've done this before. I would say as long as you are estimating them as you would a client project, then you can definitely count this work as billable because, you don't want it to penalize the team for working on, let's say, our own website, if that's something that we've, set out to do. But if the internal website's going on for 4 years now, then the time is non-billable. And
Okay.
David said, which software do we use to track performance? Again, Google Sheets. But there's also another tool that I've adopted with some of my agencies. I heard about it first. Shopify uses it. It's called Fellow. It's works as a Chrome extension. It's great for creating meeting agendas and for teams to kind of ask questions to one another or set up like even sales templates or interview templates that kind of show up on the side of your screen. But it also has a great feature for OKR tracking. ClickUp as well has a hidden area called goals, and you can link lists of tasks that the team may already have like working on internally and link those to an OKR or KPI in ClickUp. And then you can kind of see the percentage of that goal as they complete tasks on the board. So
nice. Yeah, I would say Caitlin's question, do you consider internal projects? I understand the reason for the question is more technical, but just as a blanket statement, it doesn't matter what people are working on, whether it's client facing or internal projects, it all needs to be tracked just for the purpose of actually having access to the data. I think sometimes what happens with agencies is because it's a non-billable, like you're not billing it back to a client, all of a sudden the time tracking just goes out the window. And from an operations perspective, we need to have visibility on what's happening with people, the team, and who's being utilized effectively or not. So just as a rule of thumb, everybody in the company, I think, bar the agency owner, although I would still argue that an agency owner does need to track their time and should be tracking their time. But everybody should be tracking their time across the company because then you can ascertain how much time is actually being used for certain things. And then the final question then from our dear friend Maya is, do you have any suggestions for automating invoicing?
Yes, it really depends on the software, but QuickBooks, there is a way to schedule invoices. It's all the way buried in the settings for some reason. Now, it doesn't allow you to insert a variable for like month and year, which sucks because then if you just have the scheduled invoices auto send, then all the merchants come back and say, what month and year is this for? Because they need that information. But you can at least schedule them as drafts and have a placeholder for month and year, and or have the last month be like April 2025, and then when the duplicate gets created, it says April, you change it to May and send it out. That can make things a little bit quicker. If you're using Xero, which is another common accounting software, that one actually allows you to enter placeholders. I'm sure there's a technical workaround if you got a developer in there that they could create that variable for you in QuickBooks. But and when a one-time project signs, if there are milestone invoices, I create all of those draft invoices as soon as the project signs, and I make the issue date, whatever's the, if it's 30 days from kickoff, 60 days from kickoff, I'll add the estimated date because it helps me go back to the service team and say, are we good to send this? I have it drafted kind of thing. So, I would say as much as you can set up those invoices when the contract closes, the easier it is for that accounting team. Great question.
Yeah, that was great. And then finally then from David, how do you create a habit of tracking employees' time? Violence? I don't know if that's is that a legal answer? Can you say threats of violence?
Yeah, for sure. What if some team members are hesitant, resistant of doing it? How to make it painless and won't affect the client's working time? If If someone works in an agency, that equals they must track time. If they don't want to track time, they shouldn't work in an agency. They should go work at a brand. You agency plus time tracking, they go hand in hand. It should not be optional. They can't be hesitant or if they're resistant, then it's a disciplinary thing, right? And they can't work at your agency anymore. I kind of like to use a circle of life analogy here. You track time. We use that time to invoice the clients. The clients pay us. We pay you. And also, if you have contractors on your team, I will not approve or pay their invoices until, even if they're a flat rate contractor, I will not pay the bill unless I go or someone, their manager, has approved and make sure that they have all their hours logged to the right place, to billable and non. All those kind of checks and approvals have been done before accounting goes and pays that bill, because you can kind of use that as leverage. And to make it
100%.
seamless, like implement a process around it, implement an extension if your tool doesn't have a great way of tracking time, have conversations around it, have a Slack channel around it, have people ask questions or say, hey guys, why are you hesitant to do this? Let's chat about it. What issues are you having? Because someone else on the team may have built a hack, right, on how to track their time easier, and they can kind of spread that knowledge. So. And any advice on communicating goal changes when increasing to the team? Yeah, I would make sure that, if it's a leadership call that you have or an all hands meeting, that you are reporting on how you did with your last quarter's KPIs and OKRs, and what are the next quarter's KPIs and OKRs.
Yeah, two great questions there that kind of tie hand in hand. The first question about employees that don't want to track their time, or it's painful or whatever it is. At the end of the day, you're running a business. If they can't track their time or track their time consistently, they're not fit for working in an agency. It's as simple as that. I would never have somebody in my agency that wasn't able to report back on their time, because I have no way of knowing whether a project is profitable, if we're over servicing, under servicing, if things are taking longer or longer or shorter than we expect them to. So it's a non-negotiable. So I think you give people a couple of warnings, and you have to do an education piece. Pick a tool that works easily and show them how to do it. You need to hold one of the three biggest issues that I see when it comes to leadership is, number one, knowing what the rules are, number two, communicating the rules, and number three, which most leaders fail, is accountability, holding people accountable. So communicating to them what you need from them, showing them how it's done, putting a system in place where, I don't know, maybe what I used to do at the agency I ran is we used to have a calendar every single day at 5:15, and 5:15 they had a 15-minute slot to make sure all of their time is tracked, and then every single morning the head of project or whoever it was in the company would double check it. So it meant that by the end of the week we had everything done on a daily basis and people weren't forgetting. If they're not tracking their time, then there's something wrong with your leadership. You're not putting the rules in place or communicating them effectively. So that's that one. And then for Yusuf, any advice on communicating goal changes? There are ways to communicate it. I think that verbal communication is good. So having a call where you communicate it with everybody, and then following that up then with written communication, because what some people hear and what people see in writing is sometimes two different things. So just because you let people know on a Slack message, or you let people know in an all hands meeting, it doesn't mean that the message has been received. So you have to make sure that you communicate it verbally. And again, this comes down to good leadership: verbally communicate it, and then communicate it then in writing so everybody has access to that, and then hold people accountable. If you're not holding people accountable and then you're expecting to get results, it's just not going to happen. Unfortunately, when it comes to leadership, sometimes you need to give people a proverbial slap on the wrists, a digital slap on the wrist now and again, because they're not following the rules. And the rules are in place for a reason. So hold people accountable, and if they still can't follow simple instructions, then they're probably not fit for purpose at an agency. That sounds, kind of negative, but it is what it is. You're running a business at the end of the day. Okay, I think we've covered all the questions very beautifully, might I add. So what I'll do is Tiara's going to send me over these slides, and I will make sure that everything is sent over to everybody so you have access to the slides, and then you can connect with Tiara offline for any direct questions. And thank you for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.